Hi guys, it's me and I'm massively excited to talk to you about this book, Double or Nothing by Kim Sherwood, which was released today. I got sent an advanced reading copy of it, I've read it, I have opinions about it. Stay tuned and I'll tell you everything. Hi guys, it's me and I'm here to talk about Double or Nothing, the new James Bond book by Kim Sherwood. And I'm really excited about this because I actually got to be part of the ARC team, the Advanced Reading Copy team. HarperCollins actually sent me a paperback ahead of time so I could read it and tell you all about it the moment the book gets released, which is pretty cool. Yeah, I'm really flattered and honoured to be part of that. So let me tell you about this book. Well, Double or Nothing is the next book in the James Bond continuation series. The last one was With a Mind to Kill by Anthony Horowitz. That got released, I think, in May. So this is kind of hot off the heels there. But this book is different. This book, it doesn't actually feature James Bond. The whole conceit of it is James Bond is missing. And it's about other 00 agents in the 00 section and what they get up to while he's missing to try and find out where he's gone. It's a really interesting concept for the book. And I think it's actually really timely because I read With a Mind to Kill, I did a review of it, I spoke to a bunch of other Bond fans about that book, and I enjoyed it. I thought it was like a pitch perfect Ian Fleming recreation, Anthony Horowitz type book set in a period. It was a perfect end to Anthony Horowitz's 3-book trilogy. I mean, it is like pretty much as perfect as you can get when it comes to like period James Bond. The only thing better would be digging Ian Fleming up out of his grave, resurrecting him through necromancy and getting him to write it himself. Anthony Horowitz was the next best thing. So to me, I was like, where do you go after that? And I remember I read this book on a flight to Paris, and the moment I closed it, I was like, what are they going to do next? Because really, it's a case like they're kind of spent for the time being with the period continuation pieces, so you need to have something brand new and fresh. And you know what, having James Bond go missing and having some other 00 agents look out for him, that's a really interesting and fresh concept, and I really respect that, and I think it's a very exciting concept to explore. Kim Sherwood, as the author that they chose to write this trilogy of books, is also a really bold and exciting choice. Who have we had writing the James Bond continuation novel so far? Obviously, we've had John Gardner, and then we had Raymond Benson, very well-respected thriller writer. We had Sebastian Faulks, who wrote Birdsong, of course, literary great. We've had Jeffrey Deaver, who wrote a modern-day Bond with Carte Blanche. He's a very well-respected, best-selling thriller author. We had William Boyd, another well-respected author. Then we had Anthony Horowitz, who wrote the Alex Rider series that's been turned into a movie and now a TV series. He's big. They've always been the big dogs. And Kim Sherwood is the very opposite of a big dog. I'm pretty sure she's a cat. She has actually only written one book so far, this book, Testament, which I'll talk about in a second. But it was a really, really interesting and bold choice for the estate of Ian Fleming to go out looking for an author to write the next series of James Bond books and pick her. She's got one book to her name, whereas all these other people who've written these books before have like tons of cred, I guess, that they're bringing to the table. But that is not to dismiss Kim Sherwood at all. So the moment I heard about this new trilogy of books and Kim Sherwood being selected, I was like, okay, what's Kim written? And so far it's this book, Testament. And so I immediately bought a copy and read it. And a quick digression there. This book is published by River Run Publications. And River Run Publications, you need to get your shit together. I was so excited when I heard about Kim Sherwood being selected, and I wanted to buy this book and read it. And you cannot buy this book, or you couldn't when I was trying to get it, on Kindle in America. Like, I would have sat there and paid $9 that second to read it, and I couldn't, because this book is not available on Kindle in America. And as somebody who has published 30 novels, sold 68,000 copies of my novels, reached 320,000 readers on Kindle Unlimited, I know a thing or two about digital publishing, and I know that it is borderline negligence that you haven't made this book available in America on Kindle. What the hell is your problem? You are doing a terrible job of representing your author. You're throwing away potentially thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars. Everybody's looking at Kim Sherwood now. They all want to read the book that she's written before this one, and it's not available in America on Kindle. So you know what? Get your act together. I'll stop digressing now, but I'm quite passionate about that. Anyway, this book by Kim Sherwood, I picked up and prepared to read because I was like, she's going to write the new James Bond novels. I need to find out who she is, what her writing style is like. And I approached this book with a very cynical attitude. I'm not going to lie. I was like, oh, well, you know, it's literary fiction, of course. I hate literary fiction. And I picked it up and read it. And the thing was, this book actually hit me like a punch to the solar plexus. It's a Holocaust novel about two brothers who survived the Holocaust. And, well, really it's told through the framework of one of the brothers' granddaughters. One of the brothers' granddaughter, who in my head, she was played by Kim Sherwood in the movie I ran in my head. But she is piecing together the real history of her grandfather, who she's very close to, and she realizes he has a whole life she doesn't even know about. And then the rest of the book is kind of like a flashback of this man's life and his relationship with his brother. And to me, it hit me really hard because she wrote such a powerful book about the relationship with these two brothers. And my own brother passed away about 5 years ago, but he and I had a relationship that I found such resonance with this one in that it made me cry. And other aspects, like these brothers were Hungarian, and part of this book is set in Hungary. And of course, my brother lived in Hungary for 5 years. I went to visit him. Those were some of the times I was closest to him. So Hungary, to me, is like so intertwined with that. It was a weird thing. I picked up this book expecting, approaching it very cynically, and instead it was like, oh my God, it's like this book was written for me. And it's a magical feeling. It's a magical feeling I will mention again in a little while. So stick a pin in that. But yeah, I read this book and I thought, wow, it was amazing. It's not a James Bond book by any stretch of the imagination. It's very much like a historical, it's like historical fiction, but also a mystery novel with, I don't know, it's difficult to describe. It's literary fiction. It's not what you expect with a James Bond book, but there are certain aspects to it that demonstrate Kim's writing style and its appropriateness for writing a James Bond book. Like the way she does dialogue is very punchy, it's very witty, very much like Ian Fleming did. She has a wonderful way of using allusions and also the metaphors, and the way she can say sort of two things with a single line of prose is very much like Ian Fleming. So I can see certain keys to what she does writing wise, which probably the estate of Ian Fleming noticed as well. She puts a lot of James Bond references in here, actually, so if you're into Easter eggs, it's delightful to hear those. But yeah, when I read this book, I was very surprised about how moved I was by the whole thing. And it's an oddly intimate experience to read a book by somebody you actually know, because you get to meditate inside their head, so to speak. And I've interacted since then with Kim on Instagram, and she's wonderful. She's like a really wonderful person, and I have a lot in common with her, and I feel very invested in her. So yeah, I've been very invested with wanting this book to be successful. And I think the concept of it is very strong. But what is the book like itself? Well, I'm going to divide this into sort of things that I thought were great about it, and then things that I think some Bond fans might be critical about, because I think that's something we need to talk about. I'm known as kind of like one of the Bond book guys, so I don't want to be like, oh, this book is wonderful, it's fantastic, everything is perfect about it, and then convince a bunch of people who like James Bond to buy this book, read it, and then they're like, wait a second. So let me talk about the things that are going to make you pause a little later on. But first of all, let me tell you about the things that I think are really cool about this book. The thing that I enjoyed about this book is that it brings a real breath of fresh air to the James Bond franchise. It's like getting the whole thing about James Bond is like we've got a sandbox full of toys. The James Bond franchise is like a big sandbox full of toys. You've got the movie toys, you've got the books. Everyone has the certain toys. There's the James Bond, there is Q, there is M, and then they come in different iterations, different flavors, and you can make them do different things. And so the different authors in the continuation series have used the same toys in the sandbox to tell different stories. So you had the authorized biography of James Bond. This was written way back in the 70s by John Pearson, I think it was, where he's like, oh, James Bond is real, and Ian Fleming just wrote fictionalized versions of his real life adventures. That's one way of playing with toys in the sandbox. Then you had John Gardner, who basically wrote the continuation novels as if the same James Bond from The Man with the Golden Gun had continued living and operating all the way into the 80s. And that's him playing with toys in a more conventional way. Then you had Raymond Benson come in and basically take those same toys and like rewrite that same James Bond period. It's almost like you've got a multiverse going on. And then you had Sebastian Faulks would write a very historical book using those toys in the sandbox. And then Jeffrey Deaver would come in and he'd be telling a story set in the modern day with those same toys in the sandbox. So I think, to me, what's exciting is, yeah, we've just had the Anthony Horowitz series. Then you've got all these toys in the sandbox, and you give them to an author like Kim Sherwood, and you go nuts, Kim. Tell us a story. Tell us an adventure. And that's what she does. And the cool conceit of having James Bond missing is that you have to focus on other characters in the 00 section in the world of espionage, and she has 3 really interesting characters. You've got Joanna Harwood, who is a female 00, very cold-blooded, and yeah, she's a badass. You've got Sid Bashir, who is another 00 agent, who is Muslim. And his heritage is very interesting because right now, you know, the war on terror, we've got, if you want to talk about real life espionage, a lot of it is done in countries with Islamic extremists going on. So you need to have people who can blend in there. And you've got Sid Bashir as one of those characters, which I think, given the multiculturalism of Britain right now, is a perfect choice and a very appropriate one. And then you've got Joseph Dryden, who is black, and he is a war veteran who got injured, and he's gay. And that, again, is a really interesting character to have, because if you know the real life history of spycraft and the British Secret Service and things that went on, there were huge scandals in the 50s and 60s with gay people being in the Secret Service and defecting, and it defecting because they were persecuted for being gay. And it's like such an interesting thing that in the 80s, when they were running reruns of the Spy Who Loved Me, they even joked like, this must be fiction because it's about a spy who actually likes women. It's like homosexuality and the British Secret Service were very much intertwined, and yet then you have the James Bond series of books in which are known as being like hyper masculine. So to have a gay secret agent seems like something that is very realistic and long overdue, and kind of like a way to actually pay some respect to the people who went before. So this trio of 00 agents, they are very representative of what real life spy agencies would have operating with them. A woman, yeah, I know, women are doing everything these days. A Muslim man and a gay man. These are actually the people who would realistically be spies in today's day and age. So I think that's kind of cool. I really do. And it's interesting the relationship they have and the adventure they go on. And I'm doing this because, to a certain extent, they all orbit the missing piece, which is James Bond, and they have relationships with James Bond that basically reflect on their own relationships with each other, and there's a bigger plot going on and stuff like that. It's a really interesting concept and a really strong concept to follow and go down, and that's something I felt was really exciting. There's never really been a series of books in the James Bond franchise that have actually explored other agents, that have explored what goes on beyond just James Bond. So this is something that I think is really exciting and long overdue. Criticisms of it? I would say, in all honesty, when I first started reading this book, I actually had a little bit of trouble getting into it, because the writing style is very different to, say, Anthony Horowitz's, which is very punchy. It's very punchy and very direct. It's very it's very much in a sort of journalistic style, which I think is appropriate to Ian Fleming, who is, of course, a journalist. Kim Sherwood writes in a different way, which is absolutely fine. I mean, I told you, Testament is an amazing, wonderful book. She writes, though, very much with longer sentences and a lot of metaphors and visualization in those sentences, which is fine. But what she does also, which is very different to how, say, Ian Fleming would write, is she sort of writes descriptive passages and then explains what's happening underneath, which is kind of the opposite way to a lot of the ways thrillers are written, in which you have, I mean, I just mentioned, I think, One Shot by Lee Child. That was a great one. The opening line of that is Friday, period. And that's like, it tells you what day of the week it is. And he normally uses very punchy sentences to set the scene. It's like, it's Friday, it was raining, I was in an alleyway, I was looking for this person. Whereas Kim Sherwood kind of approaches it the other way, of like, a figure was climbing up the hill, he had a sniper rifle on him, it was Sid Bashir, he was doing this. It's difficult to explain, but you have to sort of keep reading to discover what's going on, whereas I'm used to reading books where you get told what's going on and then you discover more about it. So I think there are people who read this book who might find it a bit challenging to get into the same way I did. And I think that's something that is important to be aware of, because you have to like give this book a bit of an investment, which is fine, because the other thing I would say about it is it's world building. A lot of this book, especially the first third of the book, is kind of like building what Kim Sherwood's Sherwoodverse of James Bond is, you know, who the different characters are, what the organization they work for looks like, and the way it is different to what you might have thought it looked like based on other continuation novels. So she has quite a challenge ahead of her when she starts this book, in terms of having to build an entire world, having to introduce 3 characters, and her writing style is a little different to what you might expect from a James Bond book, so it can be a bit challenging to get into it. I think that's something I wanted to actually say, because I don't want anyone to think I'm pointing them towards this book. They read it and they're like, huh? Yeah, be prepared for that, but put in the work and you'll get the reward. The other thing I think that some people might be critical about is the eternal challenge of this term woke, which I find is a really difficult thing that we've got going on now in terms of popular culture, because for the longest time popular culture hasn't necessarily been that representative of people from different backgrounds and different places. And the wonderful thing about this book, and the real strength of this book, is we take a diverse group of people who are perhaps underrepresented in terms of like spy adventures, and we talk about them. And there's this really difficult situation right now with popular culture where you're like, well, hey, if you're putting underrepresented people in as the leads of this story, is that woke? And the challenging thing is, there are some things that have been released in popular culture recently that are kind of woke. But what does woke even mean? Woke to me means they're kind of inauthentic. So there have been some things in popular culture which seem kind of inauthentic and forced. Whereas I don't think that that's what's going on with this book. And I think it's very important to like take your whole preconception of what woke is, put it on the side, and just read the book for what it is and accept the characters for who they are. Because if you go into it with a kind of a preconception of, oh, it's going to be a woke book, then you are going to miss out on the enjoyment of actually reading it and what you discover from it. But that being said, some of the people I've spoken to have been like, oh, well, you know, yeah, we know he's gay, but you don't need to keep going on about it. It's like, I don't know. That's where it starts to become interesting, and that's where one person's criticism might be something else. So moving on from what some people might find critical, might be critical of this book about, let's talk about that particular book. That particular point where people are like, oh, you know, he's a gay character, you don't need to keep going on about it. It's like, maybe you do. Maybe you do, because when you write a book, when you create anything, you can't please everybody. And let's take Anthony Horowitz's last book, With a Mind to Kill, as the perfect point. I thought that was a pitch perfect. I made another video before and I deleted it. I said pitch perfect like 27 times. I thought it was a pitch perfect period James Bond book. I thought Anthony Horowitz's writing was flawless. I thought the plot was flawless. I thought the characterization was really strong. But I finished that book and I was like, oh, it's a bit of a downer. And I didn't like it. Even though it was perfect, I didn't necessarily like it, because when you create something, you can't please everybody. But sometimes you can please somebody. And that's what really matters. When I watch No Time to Die, I know a lot of people don't like that movie because they're like, well, James Bond has a kid and he dies in the end. Me, I watched that movie and I had tears streaming down my eyes in the theatre because I was like, they made this movie for me. I have a wonderful daughter who I love dearly. And to me, seeing James Bond have a daughter and the stunned expression on his face and that protectiveness that came out in him, I loved that. The way they kind of like redeemed his relationship with Madeline and like turned it into a believable romance. I loved that. And at the end, his sacrifice. I know a lot of people didn't like that, and perhaps I would have preferred it if he and Madeline had got together and had a happily ever after. But there was something kind of magnificent about the way he was standing there with Dodo tucked into his suspenders and blood pouring down his leg, and he sees these rockets coming, and I was just like, I get it. I really get it. I really respect that. And that movie to me meant a lot. And what you have to think is, when you write a James Bond book, do you want it to appeal to everybody or do you want it to appeal to somebody? And what I think is most special about this book doesn't really come from my reaction to it at all. It was when I was speaking to David Lowbridge Ellis from License to Queer, and his eyes just lit up when he spoke about it, and he was just so passionate about it because this book represented him and spoke to him, and this book was alive and vibrant for him. And I watched his reaction to it and I was like, wow. Like, Kim wrote a book, and maybe it didn't matter what anybody else in the world thought about it, but she wrote this book that really meant something to him, and that's magical. I was like humbled when I saw that, and I've actually got a video coming in the next couple of days in which I chat to David about this book, and I just felt so heartwarming to see how passionate he was about this book, and it made me realize how important this book is going to be to some people. And it goes back to the whole idea of the James Bond continuation novels being this sandbox with toys in it, and every single author gets to play with the same toys in their own sandbox and make up their own game with them. And the thing is, it was time after Anthony Horowitz had written his final novel to either put the sandbox full of toys away for a bit, or let somebody play with it in a completely different way. And that's what Kim's doing. She is creating something completely different that speaks to a lot of people that haven't felt spoken to so directly before. And that's really powerful. And this is something that the estate of Ian Fleming has given her the permission to do. And it's going to speak to people in a way they've never been spoken to before, which I think is amazing. And then it's going to exist as like part of James Bond heritage for the rest of time. So that's kind of special. And that's kind of exciting. And to me, you know, it's difficult to be critical of this book, even if there were certain aspects about like the writing that I might not have liked as much as I could have done. When you see just the impact it has on people and how important it is to them, I think that is magical. I really do. It felt really, really exciting to be a part of. So, yeah. The other thing, I thought, wrapping this up, 24 minutes, is that some of the things that people might be critical about this book about don't necessarily have anything to do with the whole idea of it being woke or not. Like, it's set in the modern day, which is apparently something that the Ian Fleming estate told Kim to have in her book. That was one of the stipulations that came from them. And I mean, for me as a James Bond fan, just read With a Mind to Kill, all of the period James Bond stuff. Now suddenly James Bond exists in the modern age. Like, wait a second, that might be something that I don't like as much. That's not necessarily written for me. And that has nothing to do with the book being quote unquote woke or not. There are certain aspects to certain books that you're not going to like. And that's fine, because there are certain aspects to other books that you're going to love. And I think it's more important to find an audience and make them love it than find a broader audience and have them like it. Like doesn't go down in history, whereas love does. So, in a wrapped up way, this book got released. If you're a James Bond fan, I think you should go out and buy it. And I think you should read it. And you might not like it as much as the Anthony Horowitz ones, or you might like it a lot more. I don't know. That's the interesting thing. But you'll never know unless you go out and buy it and read it. And one of the problems we have with popular culture at the moment is people are always trash talking things. There's that new show She-Hulk on Disney Plus at the moment, and a lot of people are saying like, oh, it's so woke, I'm not even going to watch it. And it's like, if you don't watch it, you don't know whether it's going to be woke or not. I've watched it. I think it's great. So this book, don't decide not to buy it because you've heard from other people that it's woke. Buy the book, read it, and make your mind up for yourself. And I think it's very important you buy it and you read it because of one really, really important thing about this book. I mentioned before that the people who've traditionally written continuation novels are authors like Anthony Horowitz, who's huge. Jeffrey Deaver, who's written a huge thriller series they made movies of with Denzel Washington. Sebastian Faulks, who wrote Birdsong. These are all big dogs. Kim Sherwood is not a big dog. Kim Sherwood, as I said, she's probably a cat, is a James Bond fan. And she came up with a concept that she pitched to the estate of Ian Fleming. She did so convincingly that they decided, yes, we are going to go with you. And then Kim Sherwood started sharing her life with the rest of us on Instagram and stuff like that. And hopefully you all had the same reaction that I did. You saw her bookshelf and you saw books not dissimilar to these. And it was like, she's one of us. She's one of us. Like, she's as big a one of us as James Bond fans, our James Bond community, us Bond geeks, as my wife calls us. She's one of us. And to think that one of us gets the opportunity to write a trilogy of books, playing with the James Bond toys in the sandbox in the way she wants to. And there are people out there, like David and all sorts of other people, who she speaks to in such a powerful way. That's cool. That's cool to be a part of. That's cool to be around and to be involved with. And so, yeah, go out and buy this book and support her, because that's what Bond fans do. We support each other. And I don't know, it's a wonderful opportunity to be part of something I think that is really important and changes the shape of what being a James Bond fan is. The last couple of years have definitely seen that. I mean, we've got the Godfather, David Zaritsky, interviewing Daniel Craig in person. There's a bloke a few years ago who had a YouTube channel, and now he is the Bond authority flying to London to interview Daniel Craig. I mean, isn't that incredible? And now we've got somebody who's a James Bond fan like Kim Sherwood, through passion and talent, has been able to get the opportunity to write a James Bond book. So pick it up and read it, and maybe you like it better than the new ones, maybe you like it not as much as the new ones, but whatever way, you get to experience it and be part of it and support her and support everything about what makes the James Bond fandom good. So there we go. Go and do it. That's all I can say. Yeah. And if you have read this book, let me know in the comments down below. If you've got thoughts about it, let me know in the comments down below. I don't know. I was kind of rambling off about things, but it's kind of exciting for me because I've never been quite so closely involved with something that's so important to me before, by being on the periphery, you know, circling around, being able to write a review, get the advanced reading copy. It's like, it's fun, and I feel invested in it. And the wonderful thing is, because Kim is part of the Bond community, you get the chance to be invested in it too. Anyway, I'll be back with another video soon. Until then, ciao.
I'm Roland. I've sold 67,000 copies of my books. If you want to find out how I did it, I've got the link right here you can click. And otherwise, don't forget to subscribe. I've got more videos coming soon. Thank you.